RealAg Live. And welcome to RealAg Live, everybody. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Today I'm your host, Shaun Haney. Hope you're having yourself a great day out in the fields or in the barns, whatever you are up to. I hope it's a great one. We're going to have a fantastic discussion today about some of the things we're seeing in agribusiness. What are some of the trends from a technology standpoint? How does all of this work its way back to the farm and impact you, the primary producer? If you want to participate in today's discussion, all you have to do is enter your question, your comment in the box, whether you're watching on Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook. And Alan's already doing that. Alan, there we go. Alan says hello. Hey, hello, Alan. How's it going? Okay, let's get to it here. Bring in today's guest. It is Shane Thomas of Upstream Ag. Hey, Shane, how are you?
Good, Shaun. How about yourself?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. Lots happening in the world. Hey, Shane, I want to start off with this, and it's about we're seeing a couple different companies bring to the market basically new insurance products that are tied to essentially what we'll call big data, doing it different ways, but essentially at the end of the day, it's essentially a temperature insurance product when it comes to heat blasting of canola. What are your thoughts on this these new products?
Yeah, I think they're kind of compelling and they're very interesting for farmers in my opinion. Just because when you look at some of the biggest things that farmers deal with, it's managing risk year in and year out. There's obviously a lot of upfront capital that needs to be put into crop inputs and all these different things year over year. And you have insurance. We have hail insurance and crop insurance and all these things, but they're more of a catastrophic loss. So you have a big hail event that needs to come through, or you have a big drought and the actual total yield is extremely low, and then you have someone that comes out there to adjust it, and there's kind of a pain and there's a hassle throughout the entirety of this, where someone has to say, okay, well, you have this 160 acre field, the hail hit 20 acres and we only give you 80%. And so it's not fun for anybody during the entirety of that. But there's this other aspect where we have these shallow losses, is what I think the people in the industry and the insurance industry call them, where you're not necessarily able to, or you haven't in the past been able to insure them, where you're losing 5 bushels here, 6 bushels there from temperature, abiotic stress related issues. And so we know with heat blast in canola in Canada specifically, we see it consistently where you get those buds blasting. You don't get as many seeds on the canola plant, and that happens almost every single year. I think data that I see out of GARS and the Parametrics group was like 93% of areas last year had some sort of heat blast there, and so pretty compelling. And so now all of a sudden they're looking at being able to insure these shallower, these smaller losses to the tune of upwards of $100 or so per acre, and instead of having to pay a more significant premium up front, you're paying somewhere between, I think, like $4 and $9 is the number. And so all of a sudden you can protect against some of these other risks, such as heat and heat stress, that are going to cause yield reduction and profitability reduction clear across Western Canada.
And there is different strategies to make this happen. GARS is using satellite imagery, whereas Farmer's Edge is going to use in-field weather stations to get all this done. I think what the biggest opportunity here is canola, 20 plus million acres, there's an opportunity there. But when we think about wheat as an example, last year in Ontario, heat absolutely ravaged the yield potential of that crop. We also saw the same thing in places like Saskatchewan as well on the wheat crop. And what about corn when it comes to hot temperatures during tasseling? There's 90 million acres of corn out there as well. This is something that we could see flow into some of the other crops.
Yeah, I think we will see it flow into other crops, whether it's wheat, whether it's corn. I think if you look at the two companies that are launching it initially, that's Farmer's Edge based in Winnipeg, and you have GARS based in Moose Jaw. So Canadian companies, a lot of canola obviously elicits a lot of emotions amongst farmers in Canada too, where it's often the most profitable crop for them. It's very visible when you see that heat stress, whereas in, say, a wheat crop, which we know is just as or close to as impacted as canola in terms of how heat mitigates yields. But it's very visual with the canola side of things. So that's where groups tend to look at more. And when you look at these groups being Canadian, they have a lot of data and a better understanding of some of the canola versus going down into cotton or corn initially. But I'm pretty confident that it'll be more than just canola in the next 2 to 3 years, again, depending how these pilot years go. But then on top of that, it'll be more than just heat. All of a sudden, when you start to look at the data that you can manage and understand from a heat perspective, you can do that in the reverse now, where frost, all of a sudden a frost parametric insurance product becomes viable. Drought, or maybe it's a specific amount of rain in a specific period of time, and you have different types of insurance for crop input products as well. And so it kind of really opens this Pandora's box of different products that you can bring to market to support farmers and help mitigate some of the risk that farmers take on year in and year out.
Humidity and moisture during wheat flowering from a fusarium standpoint. There's one right there for you. Just giving everybody ideas. I should have maybe pursued that one myself. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but now how does this sort of tie in at all to what we're hearing from some of the crop protection manufacturers when it comes to like outcome-based pricing? Does this kind of data science, do these two things kind of tie together a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. And I think if you talk to some of the insurance groups that really understand underwriting, and that's getting way outside of my area of expertise, but if you talk to a lot of these groups, they will say that, you know what, these smaller, shallower type of products are maybe a more viable way, because you can control the data, you can understand the data, and you can underwrite it more confidently to offer these sorts of products. Whereas when you get into outcome, it's still possible, and there's groups doing it today. Growers Edge, not the same as Farmers Edge, but a US-based organization, is looking at doing these sorts of things where it is outcome-based, and you have Climate and the Bayer Group looking at doing it as well. And I think there is a lot of relation there when it comes down to it. It's the data, and you're utilizing some of the data to be able to gain a level of confidence in how certain you are of a specific outcome and what it's going to cost to underwrite that and offer a product in the marketplace. And so you look at some of these, you mentioned like a fusarium type of product, and I think lots of that will tie right back into the outcome of a fungicide, right? Where, you know what, you're probably going to have a better outcome when it's more humid, less hot, those sorts of things. And so there's definitely a really direct tie, and I think they will feed into one another for sure.
Have you seen any data on how farmers feel about outcome-based pricing? Because now I think it was Bayer that had first said they were going to do some pilot project on this, and I saw some of the backlash on Twitter, people not very happy and felt the farmer was going to be put at a disadvantage. Essentially, the better that you do from a yield standpoint, the more you pay, and vice versa. So have you seen any recent data on how farmers feel about this kind of system?
No, I would have seen the same anecdotal stuff that yourself has seen on Twitter and all that. And I think, ultimately the outcome based is going to be, I think where the backlash was coming from was some of these incremental costs and profit sharing is where I think there was a lot of those apprehensions. Whereas if you start to look at it from the cost reduction of a product, where if you don't hit a certain level and it just minimizes your cost based on the amount of heat or rain or whatever, all of a sudden it's more in the farmer's favor. And I think there's some different ways to structure these products that we will see companies exploring, and I'm certain Bayer and those groups are looking at it today, because I still think when it comes down to some of the biggest challenges farmers face is just that upfront risk that they are taking all of the time with crop inputs and all these sorts of things. And so is there a way to manage things like fungicide outcomes or the use of seed treatment and these sorts of things, where it's not necessarily profit sharing in the upside, but helping to get more farmers utilizing these products, because the companies know that they work and they're generally speaking going to have a positive outcome with them. And so sometimes it might just be this reduction of upfront costs that are played more to start to try and get farmers trying it, seeing how they feel and seeing what it looks like.
Where do you think we're at in the kind of the product life cycle of precision ag? Are we kind of at a maturation point here? Do we need these kind of new products to sort of spur new interest for people that aren't necessarily interested in the variable rate being the main product?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to you have different types of precision too, where you have this precision fertilizers, how we all tend to think about a variable rate nitrogen and those sorts of things. But then if you look at I think you guys had Tom Wolf on the other day, it was yesterday,
The
and
agronomist last
obviously
night.
yeah,
Yep.
agronomist, yeah. And he's obviously exceptionally intelligent when it comes to all this stuff. But you have precision spray applications now, and so where you can again, this is still coming, but you have the Weedits, and you have Precision AI, who just raised money this week, and you have the John Deere's and all these different groups that are looking at offering these precision spray application tools that I think are potentially going to get some uptake. And so, when you look at the precision adoption, I don't think we're at saturation when it comes to the actual precision fertilizer. I think if you look at just even Western Canada, where there's still a lot of farmers that are upgrading their equipment to be able to confidently utilize some of these tools to actually be able to deploy this technology. And I think sometimes there's still some of this incentive where it's not necessarily going, and again, it depends on everybody's risk appetite, and do I want to invest incremental amounts of dollars in this precision technology to maybe get a little bit of an outcome. And I don't know if I want to dive into carbon by any means, but it seems like it comes up every single conversation I have these days,
Yeah.
where all of a sudden, if you change the incentive, where there is incremental dollars available to a farmer, and again, whether this comes to Canada, what it looks like in the US, all these different places could vary, but if there is incentive there for farmers to cut back on their nitrogen or to utilize these VER products because they're subsidized or what have you, all of a sudden I think we would see some more adoption coming in that way. But I still think that there's a lot of opportunity for farmers to adopt these technologies. And quite frankly, I think sometimes there's still room to improve the products as well too, because we know that there's been challenges with them. Everybody's seeding right now, and farmers don't have time to say, well, my monitor's not working. I can't get the script to upload properly. I got to go see it. I can't wait 4 hours to get somebody to come out. So there's these little things that need to be fixed as well on the product end, or at least just more streamlined. That I think will help get adoption in the future too.
Yeah, it's always interesting. We talk to the farmers every Thursday on the Farmer Rapid Fire, and this time of the year is, how are things going? Oh, great! All my prescriptions loaded. Like, that's one of the first things they say.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So I think it's you've hit on something really there. Okay, so if we have a lot of room for growth in the area of precision ag, we definitely have a lot of room for growth when it comes to online buying. There is a lot of talk, but we're from a farmer to company supplier standpoint, we still have a lot of weight. We still have a lot of room for growth here.
Yeah, and I think this is where it always gets framed as buying too, right? And I think part of it comes back to how can it doesn't necessarily need to be retails as crop input retailers, but I just think any organization, how can you create a better experience for customers to purchase or to get an understanding of what's going on with their business as they interact with you and your sales staff, or what's going on with their programming, all these different things. There hasn't been a lot of thought of how do we make sure that this customer has a very, very streamlined communication tool or medium to go look at what's going on with their business at Nutrien or at P&H or whatever different retailer organization you're thinking of. And I think that the real focus should be on how do we actually create this more useful tool for farmers to be able to understand what's going on with the business. Like I think about banks all the time, where if I was to go, I bank with Royal Bank and they have an app, obviously, but if a bank didn't have an online app component, I would say, see you later. And even if I don't want to buy securities, even if I'm not necessarily sending e-transfers, I just want to know kind of what's going on with, did I actually get paid, all these different things. And so I think this same sort of dynamic can come in with farmers too, where if they're sitting at their accountant, for example, can I just export the invoices very seamlessly from an app so that is good to go? Can I see how much credit is on hand? Can I see what I purchased last year and what I need to maybe purchase for next year? And so there's these little things that I think can be beneficial as well. And I think that gets into what I call ambient ag commerce, where it's more about how do we start to ensure that the customer, the farmer, has the these touch points, how they want to engage with the retailer, how they want to engage with their equipment dealer, those sorts of groups. How do they also get information that's coming from all these sensors in the future that are going to be coming at them? How can they access that information and use that information? I think this portal and this concept of being able to have a spot to go in and look at that will start to move down that route, and that's where we'll start to see potentially some buying and that sort of thing. Because right now you have FBN who buy, they sell a little bit, but it's not that significant in Western Canada by any means.
So, okay, the way I hear you describe all that, we need to start to think about online commerce at the farm level more from a B2B standpoint than comparing it to the B2C, which would be like Amazon. Because that,
Sure.
the Amazon purchaser is looking for other things than necessarily a B2B system would. And this integration of the supply chain and the information that comes with that, that's really one of the benefits that maybe isn't talked about enough when it comes to online buying from the farmer.
Yeah, I think to me that's more the angle than buying necessarily. I think we always get focused in on the transaction aspect, but there's all these different interactions that lead up to the transaction. And I even think of myself as an agronomist in ag retail, and I was interacting with my customers, every single week, and they were only transacting, call it 8 times a year or something like that. And so you start to see where's the opportunity. It's to reduce friction for that farmer to get information, to understand what's going on, to see what's happening within their business, and even to be able to access things like, we talk about, and you might get into this too, Shaun, but we talk about, well, we have all these different apps, and so farmers don't want to have 37 different apps. But if now all of a sudden your retailer can also have your crop plan on there, they can also have your scouting reports, they can also have what you've previously bought, and maybe in the future there is a pricing aspect on there as well. Now you've started to congregate that in one spot that's convenient for the farmer and beneficial for them from a time perspective and all those sorts of things.
That speaks very well, though, to the farmer that is 100% loyal to one retail. If I'm a farmer that's buying from 3 or 4 different retails for various reasons, then that maybe doesn't. I'm not as interested.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think that is one thing, and I'll put my retail hat on for a second, and I think this is where some of these retailers will use this as a means to try and get a farmer that's, instead of being 65 or 70% them, hey, we want you to be 95% because we're supporting you in a more meaningful way that your competitor, our competitors just aren't. But definitely, there's most farmers always have that second or third retail that they're going to be doing business with, or split everything evenly. So yeah,
we haven't learned our lesson. We're still trying to gate people through technology. Like if we can trap them. This is a better mousetrap. And we sometimes find out that mousetrap, this is the exact same thing that was going on with ag tech, right? Where you had to be in our system. And if our system doesn't talk to anybody else, we don't release our API to anybody else. You got to be 100% committed to us. And we're finding that trend is changing out there in the space. So I guess we haven't learned our lesson.
Yeah, I think every single industry's went through that, and we're still trying to maneuver from that. And even if you think about, you can get into all the different tech examples of it, where there's just you try to build these walled gardens versus this, call it, open approach. And BlackBerry is a good example in phones of how they tried to lock everything in. They didn't create the app store. They didn't have this open infrastructure. And now they're more of a security type of company than a phone organization. And so you have that. But even on, you think about the internet, where once we got HTML, all of a sudden that was a consistent language and code that everybody could start to talk to and build from and have these building blocks. Whereas in ag, everybody's kind of doing their own thing. There's still this, we want APIs, but only APIs to a non-competitor, and that obviously creates a ton of friction and a challenge. And I think the other thing too is, even when you look at, I tend to look at a lot of theory, Shaun, so bear with me for a second. But there's this individual by the name of Carlotta Perez, and she talks a lot about all the different transitions from different technologies, from like the steam engine and to all the way to the internet. And she kind of builds it into these phases where you have this, what's called the installment phase, and then the deployment phase. And in the installment phase, it's where all the capital is going to kind of build out and figure out the infrastructure where this is actually going to work on. If you think to a train, That was the steam engine and then the rails to be built out, and that obviously takes time and takes effort and consistency. And when we go into a tech side of things in ag specifically, we haven't necessarily got that consistent highway or those rails that everything operates on, and that's still being figured out. And I think that's where the challenge obviously lies, where we don't have that convenient, do you want to log in via Google, via Facebook, via whatever, everything kind of talks and is connected. And we're still at that point where there isn't the openness. And I think we're getting there. There was Linux this week just announced that they're creating some open infrastructure. And you even had Greg Myers, CIO at Syngenta, that was talking about how all the different companies need to be open to creating a more open framework, which I think is phenomenal. But it still comes down to being that core group or that core platform that's the one being used is extremely lucrative. If you look at Apple, they're taking and extracting 30% of everything that runs through the App Store, because on their operating system, if you want to have an app, you need to go through their App Store and develop on their rules. And so it's very lucrative. It's an extreme position of control. It's a big moat as well, because people don't want to leave at that point. And so you have this weird incentive problem in agriculture now, where it's like, well, I want to build open, but I also need to make sure that I'm that go-to product for the farmers first and foremost. So I'm going to focus on that versus trying to make sure everybody else can build into me. And so you have this weird kind of back and forth, where I know these companies want to be open, but they're also trying to look out for numero uno, so to speak, first, so that they can get things going. So yeah, it's an interesting predicament, and I think it will get figured out. I mean, I'm overly optimistic on everything, as you can probably tell, but I do think that there's a lot of potential there here moving forward.
Apple did build a fantastic mousetrap. There may never be another one like it, for sure. That's a very good example. So just to circle back to the online buying for a second, one of the data points we talked about before we started broadcasting here was Nutrien said that 41% of their transactions this spring will go through their online portal. One of the things that came from Margie Eckelkamp at a Farm Journal. And one of the things with that is, I asked the question: who cares? Does it matter that the 41% of the transactions are going through the online portal, when probably a lot of their own field staff are doing that transaction for the farmer? So what does this really tell us?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that there's one on the retail front. If you can be more efficiently manage your staff, I think that's a good thing. But I think the biggest aspect is that when you have sales agronomists or salespeople entering crop plans or entering orders and all that, it's very backwards to the staff facing. So that's where we'll use Nutrien. They're an easy example of, well, everybody at the location can see it, but the customer can't necessarily go in and see, hey, you know what, I do have 300 tons of nitrogen booked, or I do have 233P booked, or whatever canola variety. Whereas if you get it entered in through if the staff, even if it is the staff entering it and it is through this portal that does have a customer facing dynamic to it, all of a sudden you begin that value creation for the farmer. You create that habit for the farmer that, hey, I can go to my Nutrien hub and I can see what products were ordered or what my agronomist entered in for me. Even if they're not the ones entering it, there's still this point where it becomes this medium that is useful for the farmer, and it's using the staff as that, call it, starting point to get that customer going there. Because we know that farmers don't have the time to go in and try and navigate this. So if it's pre-populated, it's starting to get figured out. I think that's where the starting point is. So I think that's why it's an interesting data point and something that to pay attention to here in the future, because Nutrien hasn't talked about it in Canada in the past.
Well, what I hope here's what I hope doesn't happen is that retails take the trend from like a Best Buy, where essentially you walk into the retail point, being Best Buy, and the people that work there don't know anything about any of the products that are on the floor. Let's hope that as this trend continues, that there still is that on-site expertise of that person, that agronomist, to help the farmer out, besides just, hey, taking orders.
Yeah, I think it will be. I think the majority of these retails still do have this value-added mentality that we want to have the experts. We want to have the understanding of what's going on in the field, in the area, and that sort of thing. It's interesting though you bring that up. This is something that's more to Latin America, but worth mentioning, I think, is that in Brazil, I believe it was last week, Syngenta actually announced that they created their first store within a store. Where you mentioned Best Buy, where you have these kind of Sony area, or call it Samsung areas, or Apple specific areas. This group down in Brazil is looking at having Syngenta experts on the digital front in a specific area of their retail, so that farmers can go in there and have a conversation about that day in and day out. So that's kind of a compelling approach. I'm not saying that's going to happen in Western Canada by any means, but it's interesting just in that you have this store within a store, and this focus on the digital side of things as well, alluding to kind of our earlier conversation, where there's still this need to better understand, make sure there's the right positioning, product fit for the customer before actually putting something on their farm. So little things being tried to help progress that forward.
Hey, question here from Kara watching on Facebook. You follow technology trends really closely, Shane, so I ask, what's on your watch list?
I watch. I probably watch it all. I'm not. I don't discriminate too much, but I'm a big fan of I would say two things that are probably disproportionately taking up my interest now is biologicals. I'm pretty fascinated in, not in the sense that they're going to take over agriculture in the short term, but because they have a lot of potential, and because there's a lot of these little stepping stones being created to help with the co-formulation of synthetics, to help with the longevity of them in a jug, to better understand where they're going to fit to get a better outcome. So biologicals is one that I've been paying a lot of attention to, as well as fintech in agriculture, which is kind of interesting. We haven't heard a lot about it, but just the ability to more seamlessly embed financial tools within platforms, within just even having a farmer be able to be incentivized for the good actions that they take, as making agronomic plans, or just being, call it, better farmers. Can they get incentivized through better rates through their bank lending, all these sorts of things? So those are kind of two areas that I've been fascinated to watch here over the last little bit.
Last week, I interviewed Jeff Wheeler from a biological company, Plant Response. And one of the questions I had for him, he's an ex-Monsanto guy, now working in the area of biologicals. And one of the things that we chatted about is, I kind of like, I walk into a farm show, when we used to walk into farm shows. I even look at my inbox. I'm getting inundated weekly by some company that has a new biological that does something. I struggle, I think like farmers do, to sort of filter through all that to get an understanding of, okay, this sounds good. Does this actually work? Is this, something that you and three buddies sort of crafted in the garage, or is there actually science behind it? I think more than ever, this is a really tough time to sort all that out.
Yeah, it really is. It's challenging because you can create whatever you want in your own little still, and package it up and sell it. And there was some various changes to CFIA and all these sorts of things a number of years back, which has made it pretty prolific all over Western Canada. But I think the biggest thing is when I look at retails in Western Canada as an opportunity to differentiate by helping their customers actually understand which products are viable, which ones aren't, or doing their own trials so that they can go to a customer confidently and say, hey, you know what, if you are interested in playing or dabbling in these biologicals, here's the three that we are more confident in. And because it even comes down to the science is there, but I can pull up a journal article that says, hey, this specific strain of Bacillus subtilis or whatever different biological, it works. But then there's all these other dynamics of, okay, well, what was the actual load? How was it formulated? So what percentage of that are actually going to get to the soil and actually be able to effectively work in the soil on this specific crop in these specific conditions? And so it's just a wild. It's not even that it is the Wild West, but it's even beyond that, where there's just all this complexity, and it really takes a lot of digging to be able to understand where the potential is. And that's where I do think, whether it's independent agronomists, whether it's retailers, I think it's a really unique opportunity to be able to better support farmers with the better answers, because I don't think there's necessarily a right one, but something to support them with a better answer and narrow in where they can be looking and playing around with.
Two things. one manufactures biologicals. It fits very well into the narrative of sustainable farming, regenerative agriculture. So it fits.
Yeah.
It's in that keyword. So there's some opportunities there. And two, from a retail perspective, it is a way for retails to differentiate themselves, like you said, through doing some of the trials, but also with some of the products that they're offering and some of the responses to those products people may get in the area. And another component of that, I don't want to pull back the curtain here too much, the margin of those products, because if we look at the margin on seed and traditional crop protection products, those margins have plummeted. Extremely competitive. I know the product prices have gone up. I'm sorry to tell farmers, the margin has gone the opposite way, very much shrunk. And so this is an opportunity for retails to find some margin as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's where for them it's there's the incentive there to do the work to be able to support it, because they can, if they find the right products that are working, farmers are going to want to utilize those, and they can help make sure that those products are paying for that work, because it does take a lot of effort to train and educate and understand those products that have been there in the retail call it side of things, working towards to understanding that. And it's crazy what it takes to navigate through. And so I think that can be, to your point, a really nice differentiator. And it's not a trend that we're going to hear less of. I think it's just a matter of how is this going to be positioned in the future as in combination with synthetics, and what is that going to look like? So it'll be interesting to watch.
Absolutely. I like how you put that, for sure. There's an incentive for retails to do the work to help their farmer customers, for sure. I like that very, very much. Shane, one of the things that I think comes up a lot when I'm talking to precision ag company clients, or even anybody in the software space, I think just in general, anybody that's handling farmer data, when we're doing, like, say, a product spotlight on the radio or just having a general discussion, I am finding an high emphasis. I was going to say overemphasis, but I'm not sure we can overemphasize it. The privacy of the data. Who owns the data? It is something that I think companies are very aware of, farmers are concerned about, and they're trying to address it head on. Is everybody doing a good job of it? I don't know, but I know that it's coming up a lot in conversations I'm having with those companies.
Yeah, I would say, I think the biggest thing too is companies are hyper aware of it. I don't talk to any that take it for granted, quite frankly. They all are very much focused in on it. And I think, there's the Ag Data Transparency. So there's these groups that are working to support farmers in this. And I think there is this aspect of farmers want to own their data. But I think part of it too is, from a farmer perspective, is understanding what am I actually going to gain from this data? Like, you can own the data, but if you don't actually derive any utility or incremental decision making that helps you support your farm through profits or increased yield, whatever that is, it's not necessarily worth a lot. So you kind of have this curve where it's like this control versus utility. And I have an image for it where, you're going to maybe give up a little more, and it's not necessarily ownership, but it might be a little bit of your privacy, so that you can access the algorithms, you can access the aggregated data of everybody else, so that you can understand what the implication of your data means to you, and make a decision accordingly. And I think that's something that needs to be thought of from the farmer perspective, is not so much do I own it or not, but from a privacy perspective, what am I open to sharing, and how can I make sure that I'm going to derive some value out of that? Because I've heard so many times from farmers, well, my data is worth something, but if you ask them what it's worth, it's like, well, I don't actually know, but the worth, what it's worth is actually the decisions you can make from it, in my opinion, anyways. And so I think that's where it needs to be thought of, not so much as this black or white, but okay, where am I going to give a little bit so I can make sure I access all of these different algorithms, this data set, because all these companies need to be able to create the algorithms and the understanding to help inform that, and they need data to do that. And I think that's something that needs to be thought of. But to, I guess, more directly answer your question, I think everybody's cognizant of it. They're all trying to make sure that it's supportive of farmers, and making sure that nobody's getting the wool pulled over their eyes, so to speak.
I like that. The value in the data is what the farmer does with it. I think that's a really good way to put it. Hey, Shane, really appreciate you joining us here today on RealAg Live. All the best. And everybody, I encourage you to check out Upstream Ag. Shane does a great job, puts out his newsletter every single weekend. Fantastic insight. Shane, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Shaun. It was fun.
Encourage everybody to go to RealAg, listen to RealAg. Don't go to it. Listen to RealAg Radio, 4:30 Eastern, 2:30 Mountain today. We're going to talk to the new general manager for CAP, Brendan Mahoney. I've also got an interesting discussion, an article that was written in Foreign Policy magazine. Basically, two writers saying big agriculture is better. We'll discuss that and break it down for you and see what you think as well. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Live. We'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.